Hey guys, Lex1020 here, and no, PlayStation Network is not back online. This is a pre-recorded game, so, okay. So, today I want to talk about, did Nintendo abandon the hardcore gamer? I know this is kind of a topic that comes up a lot. Nintendo, moving more towards the casual gamers and less towards the hardcore gamer. Not making very hardcore games, not making a lot of games, But the thing is did Nintendo actually abandon the hardcore gamer, or was it the developers that abandoned Nintendo? Because if you want to look at it, Nintendo really started to move towards, and I will be honest, they moved towards casual gamers. And they really started to move towards casual gamers with the GameCube. Compared to the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox, the GameCube had subpar graphic and subpar hardware in it. And that nobody can really deny that. Yeah, the GameCube had some pretty beautiful games on it. Metroid Prime and Metroid Prime 2 were exceptionally beautiful, along with the Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes game on there. But Nintendo really started to move towards the casual gamer after the GameCube. When the Wii came out, I think Nintendo no longer really wanted to compete with Sony and Microsoft for the hardcore gamers, and they wanted to go towards a new, more unexplored audience, the casual gamer. And so they created a more, I'm not going to say family-friendly, more family-friendly console, because it really all just depends on what games are on the console that makes it family-friendly or not. But they definitely went towards a more affordable console. When the Wii came out, it was $250 compared to the Xbox's $400, compared to the PlayStation 3's $600. They really wanted to make a console that was more affordable, and so that they could get it into people's houses easier. And all in the name of big business. The more you sell, the more money you make, right? So, I don't fault them for that. I actually don't fault them for really much of anything. But what they did is they made a more affordable console, but you can't make something affordable without taking something out. And okay, let me rephrase that. That was a little bit bad of a phrase. You can't make something and sell it for less than it costs to make it. How's that sound? So Nintendo could have made something with the same graphic capabilities as the PS3, but then they couldn't have sold it for $250, and if they can't sell it for $250, they're not going to sell as many of them. The evidence is the PS3 or the Xbox. Nintendo sells way more than the PS3 and the Xbox, and I think most of that has to do with price. The Nintendo Wii right now is $200, and the Xbox is like $250, $300, and the PS3 is like $354 now, I think. I don't know. I bought mine a long time ago. I've stopped keeping track of the prices. But really, I think affordability is one big thing that helped the Wii. And so, they tried to make it affordable so they could put it in people's houses, but then that affordability came at a cost. It came at graphical powers. Yeah, I mean, the Wii can put out some pretty beautiful and some nice looking graphics. Evidence would be Twilight Princess or Metroid Prime 3. They looked really good, but then the developers spent a lot more money and a lot more support from Nintendo making those. So, they took out the hardware that could really ramp up the graphics of it. And this goes back to the GameCube. The GameCube couldn't put out the same type of graphics that the PS2 and the Xbox could. And what happened is developers could see that they could get better graphics, better gameplay, better quality games on these other systems, on the PS2, on the Xbox. They could make them look better and play better. So naturally, they're going to go to those because they can get them to work better. And if it works better, then it sells better. Point in case. So the developers really kind of started to move away from Nintendo and go to the two other major gaming giants because they could get better because they could get better graphics, better gameplay on these other consoles. So why wouldn't you do that? You can sell more that way. And then that only really carried over even more to the Wii, when they released the Wii with not much better hardware than the GameCube. And that, you can look that up. The Wii has about the same hardware in it that the GameCube does. Maybe a little bit better, but what the Wii's main focus on was motion control. And so the developers, seeing that they could still put better quality games, better quality graphics, etc. on these other consoles, started to move away from Nintendo even more than they already were, up to the point of where they've practically abandoned Nintendo altogether. Look at developers like Square Enix. Believe it or not, Final Fantasy used to be Nintendo exclusive. The first Final Fantasies were actually on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and then they were put onto the PS2 because the Nintendo 64 couldn't put out the same graphics that the PlayStation 1 can. What happened is the Nintendo 64, when it was using cartridges, Square Enix saw that it could get more data and higher quality data on a disc, which the PlayStation 1 used, and so they jumped ship and went to the PlayStation. And then that's really shown now that after that, all the games up till 13 have been Sony exclusive, and then 13 came out PlayStation 3 and Xbox, but Nintendo doesn't have the hardware to run Final Fantasy 13, so they didn't put it on there. And that, that's why I think that Nintendo is getting this notion that they're abandoning the hardcore gamer, is because they don't have these games on there. They don't have games like Killzone on there, which they will probably never have. But they don't have games, and I'm just using these as examples, they don't have games like Killzone or Halo or Call of Duty. They do have some Call of Duty, but it's not the same. But they don't have games like these on their console because their console doesn't have the hardware to support them. The developers aren't going to really waste their time and money to try and develop games for a console that is so subpar to the rest of them. Subpar graphically and hardware wise. Let me continue to point that out, that when I'm talking subpar, I'm talking graphics and hardware. The developers aren't going to develop games for a console with subpar hardware in it. It just wouldn't make sense. People wouldn't buy it, and they would just waste money. If you release, and let me put it this way, if you release two products, alright, and one product has by far superior performance. Alright, you release two cars. Let's say it that way. You release two cars. You release a BMW, and you release a little crappy Buick, What are you gonna buy? Are you gonna buy, and say they're the same price too, are you gonna buy the BMW, or are you gonna buy the little Buick? Of course you're going to go and buy the BMW, because it's a nicer car, it's a higher quality car, it's got better interior, better driving, better handling than the little Buick does. And you see, that's what it is that when the developers are releasing these games, they're releasing two games at the same time for the same price, where one of them is very clearly inferior to the other. And that's, the Nintendo games being released for the same game being released on a Wii and on a PS3 or an Xbox. The one on the PS3 and the Xbox is going to by far be the better game most of the time. So that's why developers really have moved away from the Wii, is because they don't want to deal with wasting their money and time to make these games that people don't want. And it is true that people don't want them, because there have been outstanding games on the Wii. Examples would be Mad World. It was really a fun game, and it was a great game, but people didn't really want it. Or Dead Space Extraction, another great game on the Wii, but again, people didn't want it. So the developers have really moved away from developing for the Wii, and that's just because that people don't want it, because the casual gamers are flocking to the Wii. So if the casual gamers are going to flock to it, why would you develop for it? And then, but what about all of the mini games or third-party crap? What about all those? Nintendo, yeah, there's like a ton of mini games on the Wii. There's like 7 billion games that are all mini games on the Wii. Yeah, I mean, like I think every 3 months I see a new Circus mini games being released. Well, the thing is that those aren't Nintendo. Like, yeah, they're on a Nintendo system, but they're not made by Nintendo. The only games Nintendo really makes are Mario and like Legend of Zelda. Those are only the real games that Nintendo actually makes are Mario and Legend of Zelda, and they release those occasionally, but it's not Nintendo that makes all these third-party games. Nintendo's just a publisher and a system owner, and sometimes a developer. What it really is that these third-party publishers will come in, and they will make these mini-games because they can, and because people will buy them. And the real developers, not the real developers, the hardcore developers like Bethesda, like Guerrilla Games, Bungie, won't go to the Nintendo because they can't really make their style of game on the Nintendo because of the limited hardware. So while Nintendo has made a console and aimed it more towards the casual gamer, a hardcore developer could still go to Nintendo, and with enough work they could make a hardcore game on Nintendo. But the thing is that they don't want to spend that time and work when they can just release the same or a better version of the game on the other systems. So is it that Nintendo's abandoned the hardcore gamers? Well, to a degree it is. Nintendo has, made the console aimed at the casual gamers. But it's more of that the hardcore developers have abandoned Nintendo. Not so much that Nintendo's abandoned us. The hardcore developers don't want to release their games on Nintendo. They don't want to work with Nintendo. And so Nintendo's left with 7 billion mini games and like 6 hardcore games. See, it's the developers that have abandoned Nintendo, not Nintendo that has abandoned the gamer. And then maybe Nintendo's trying to rectify this with Project Cafe, but you never know. We'll find out. We'll see what happens. So that was just some thoughts I had about Nintendo abandoning the hardcore gamer. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Check me out on YouTube, youtube.com/Lex.